Maybe you are still one of the few intolerable, right-winged fundamentalists that thought that only women get pregnant or only women get abortions. But apparently, biology has been replaced with feelings. And it has, this feeling is being led by our old friends, Planned Parenthood, and the National Association of the Repeal of Abortion Laws. Their catchy hashtag campaign is pro-trans, pro-choice. Well, Oprah Winfrey, I can honestly say I did not see this. Oprah Winfrey introduced people to the first pregnant man in 2008. This would be a woman named Tracy that transitioned by calling herself Thomas. She had double mastectomy with a dose of hormones so that she could grow facial hair. Thomas thought it would be nice to have a baby someday, so though Thomas wanted to be a guy, Thomas left his, I'm going to use some pretty rough language, left his vagina, uterus, and ovaries intact. But for some reason, even though Thomas was a legally documented male, he had to have a sperm donation. I don't know how that works that way. Thomas has since had 2 more children, and in 2012, he decided to undergo surgery for a more complete transition to the male appearance. That's what she really is, she now lectures on trans fertility and reproductive rights. Now, what is happening to our world? What is happening to our country? What's happening to our state and even our parish? What is happening? What was once a rare psychological disorder called gender dysphoria is now being promoted as normal. And we are demanded to accept it, just like 50 years ago, before some of your time, 50 years ago we were demanded to accept abortion, and 10 years ago we were demanded to accept gay marriage. And so now we're being demanded to accept the transgender agenda. Well, what is the transgen agenda? I have 4 questions I want to ask and answer. The first one is, what is the transgen agenda? Gender identity is understood, this is not my definition, it's the secular world's definition. Gender identity is understood to refer to each person's, listen to this, deeply felt internal and individual experience of gender, which may or may not correspond with the sex assigned at birth. This includes a person's sense of their body that could be adapted by surgery, hormones, or other means. Note that the gender identity is self-defined, so the person defines it themselves what gender they are. And if they claim to be a certain gender, they are asking the rest of the world to identify them that way, to endorse their personal feeling in that regard. Internal experiences is code for feeling, and so feelings now trump actual biological facts. Now, how you feel about something or about yourself is more important than the actual facts about your body. And this really isn't about Thomas, the character on Oprah. It's really about all of us. Because you might think, and trust me, I would prefer to just stick to preaching. I mean, really, that's what I'd rather do, is just take a passage in the Bible and do an expository sermon on it. That's much more fun for me. So why do we need to talk about this? Well, because it's about us. It's all about changing our self-conception, how we see ourselves. As fringy as it may sound, injecting this language of the pregnant man, or the push to separate the word pregnancy from the word woman. And so maybe you've heard it, the term birthing person. That's the new term now, birthing person. It's a clear signal of an attempt to erase gender, and in erasing gender, we can erase family. It's what groups have been trying to do for years, is disrupt the family. For example, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act is based on the assumption that one's perceived gender identity does not always match their sex assigned or designated at birth. So the thinking goes like this: the law should allow for a more arbitrary array of definitions of gender. So a person may be male or female or both or neither, or there's a list on some entities of up to 50 different genders you can select from. And if you don't like one of those, you can determine your own. Just pick your own. So what are some basic components of this agenda? What's trying to be promoted in this agenda? Well, let me mention three things that I believe this agenda is trying to promote. One I've already alluded to, the destruction of the family unit as designed by God. So if we agree to change the language to suit transgender lobby, we are ultimately agreeing to destroy the law that defines what family is. We are redefining humanity, and we're taking away the only autonomous way of forming a family. Again, we're all adults in here. The only autonomous way to form a family is a man and a woman coming together. That's the only way to do it. And when government tries to redefine how that happens, they are striking at the very root of the family. It's the ideology that a man and a woman in a monogamous relationship that's under the committed union of marriage, that is out of date, it's ineffective, you can't raise a family that way, it's not the way to form families, and it's not the way to form community. Gabriel Gubby, I believe is how you pronounce the last name, in The Global Sexual Revolution, points out that the gay rights movement had long since moved beyond the aim of removing legal penalties for homosexual practice. They were determined, to listen to this, to abolish heteronormality. The very idea of heterosexual union of a man and a woman as being normal, that was always the gay agenda, was to say heterosexual is not normal. And so transgender is coming in on that same wave. In order to destroy the idea that heterosexual relationships are natural, it's necessary to capture the hearts and the minds of children and adolescents who are highly impressionable. Hence the drive to promote the false notion of gender fluidity among children and teenagers. And that is sometimes done under sex education or the guise of anti-bullying programs. It's done through entertainment and social media. And many adults feel, with their intuitiveness, they feel uneasy about all this, but they really don't know what to do. They're afraid to say anything, or they'll be claimed that they are discriminating against transgender people. And that word discrimination is a big, bad, ugly word that nobody wants to be used on them. It's kind of like the word race. Nobody wants to be called a racist. Well, nobody wants to be called that you're discriminating against somebody. And so because of that, we are afraid to speak up in the circles in which we live. A second basic component of the transgender agenda is the destruction of free speech. So the destruction of the freedom of speech. Free expression now is called hate speech. If you don't fall in line with the directives that the transgender community and the pronoun protocol, then you're called it's called hate speech. A lot of folks have been tricked into thinking that the purpose of all this equal rights is for a minority of the demographics and to be sure they are secure, but it's really about changing the language, and it's really about redefining who we are. And so indeed the term civil rights are used, and we all say, well, we're for civil rights. And it really works good to stop a debate that you're going to lose on facts by saying, well, what that is bothering civil rights. That's comes against civil rights. And a lot of times we are blackmailed by social blaming that's heaped upon us. We're afraid of a name that's going to be used. We're going to be called a hater, a bigot, or a fundamental right-winger or something like that. Also a term is used, transphobia. It was first homophobic and now it's transphobic. That's the definition, again, from the world, not from me. Transphobia is an intolerance of people whose appearance or behavior challenges gender expectations and norms. An example of non-criminal expression of this is to purposely use the wrong male or female pronouns to refer to trans people. So that's the world's definition, that's not my definition. Let me just look at that definition a little bit. First, it has taken the concept of disagreeing with someone and their philosophy, and it's moved it to being intolerant. So notice it's, instead of saying you disagree with that, now you're intolerant. And then it takes intolerance and it makes it a phobia. The clear implication is that there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with my attitude, there's nothing wrong with the behavior of the transgender person. An interesting academic look at how changing language can actually change a culture is found in an article from Stanford Law Review article written by Cass Sunston and Timra Karan, I think is how you'd pronounce the name. It explains how you can, listen to this, this has nothing to do with transgender, this has to do with changing language. It explains how you can take an implausible idea and make it seem plausible by raising its availability in public discourse. So you can take a completely implausible idea that a man can become a woman or that a man can get pregnant. Completely implausible. You can take that idea, put it up in public discourse, talk about it, say that it can be done, put it on Oprah. I mean, that's the fourth person of the Trinity, isn't it? Is Oprah? So put it on Oprah, and you can actually elevate it, and people will start accepting it. That's what's happening. And the law review goes on and it says that using the normal channels of Hollywood, academia, the media, you can pave the path to public policy change. Forcing changes in our language are designed to force changes in our thinking. Just like your favorite show for the last 10 years or so always has its nice little wholesome, healthy gay couple in it. If it's not in the first 4 or 5 episodes, it's coming, okay? Always a nice little sweet, healthy gay couple. Well, now it's always going to be the nice, well, has it all together trans person. It's just going to slowly be put in everything. It is actually in libraries, in our public school libraries. It's in our Ouachita Parish public school library. Just a sweet, wholesome, transgender person. Margaret Thaler Singer, an expert on cults, has written about the role of rhetoric, so we're talking about changing language, rhetoric and stifling independent thinking among cult members. Again, it has nothing to do with transgender, it has to do with the study of cults, but transgender has an attitude of a cult. So according to Singer, she says, if a government could control all media and interpersonal communication while simultaneously forcing citizens to speak in politically controlled jargon, it could blunt independent thinking. The secular world does not want Christians thinking independently. They want to stifle independent thinking. In the case of gender identity, this means accepting language that universally redefines, or perhaps better I would say, undefines all of us, especially the family. A third basic component of the transgender agenda is a more centralized power with the government. And, you know, this is where I have to say, hold me back, Jesus, okay? Once we allow the state to refuse to recognize that children are a result of a man and a woman, a male and a female, then we grant the state power to redefine the family. And once they redefine the family, they can redefine it so they can disrupt it however they want. I have a little phrase, you can write it down, you can go and put it in your safe deposit box, it'll come true. The more power government has, the less power the individual and the family has. That's just my basic political premise. Okay, whatever, we got that turned off, thank you so much. Because I'd be feeling nervous in this message as I was hearing voices, okay? I feel very nervous about that. So thank you for correcting that for me. So transgender orthodoxy has moved us so far past the bounds of sanity that any attempt to question its effects are quickly discouraged and even punished. We're, again, shamed with some name. We're expected to shut up and accept that public schools are passing policies to keep students' gender identity transformation away from the parents knowing it. Medical professionals can file to remove children from their parents' custody if parents oppose physical or chemical transition efforts. A young man competes in a women's swimming team and takes home the woman's championship. A man who claimed to identify as a woman was put into a women's prison where he impregnated 2 female inmates. In each of these cases, some government agency has said, this is normal and okay, you be quiet and don't say anything. It may have been as small as a local school board or as large as a federal agency, but some government agency was involved. Hold me back, Jesus. Second big question to look at, we won't take near as much time on this one. Second question to look at, when did the concept of division between sex and gender occur? See, transgender, like most of the postmodern thinking, it makes a distinction between how I feel and what's real. It makes a division between that. And for history, it's been that the fact will take precedence over what I feel. But now in postmodernism, what I feel is now real. It doesn't matter what the facts are. So let me give you some current terms that you will hear. So let me give you some current terms. These are terms, secular terms, these are not my terms. First, the term gender identity. Everyone has a gender identity. Their definition, not mine. Everyone has a gender identity. This is the gender that someone feels they are. This might be the same as the gender that they were given at birth, or it might not be. Another term is assigned at birth. This is the view that an assigned title by a medical person was given to you at birth. It identifies, forgive the crudeness, it identifies the genitals that a child possesses and is strictly a biological label. Change the genitals and you can change the label. And then the one that I really have to pray I don't get too riled up on is cisgender. Now, cisgender used to mean a non-transgender person, so that would be us. But cisgender is totally weaponized now It is defined as your mind just so happens to allow your assigned sex to exist alongside your gender identity. So it just so happens that I was born male and my mind says I'm male and I feel male. It just so happens that way. By the way, if you're going to create a word, cisgender, if you're going to create a word, hold me back. If you're going to create a word that I got to look up in a dictionary to apply to me, you're off. Okay, because I can tell you a word you can use on me. You can use the word 6,000 years old. You can use the word man. That's all you got to do. You don't need a dictionary to find out who I am. Okay, you don't need a doctor to find out who I am. You don't need a biologist to find out who I am. You just go to Genesis and find out who I am. That's all you need. Okay, so if you want to get some crude word and invent some word, just take a dictionary to look up. You put it on somebody odd. Don't put it on me. So I'm not taking that term cisgender on me. You can't use that on me. Okay, was that okay? We're all right? Okay. I feel better now. At least I feel better. Okay, maybe you don't. Okay. A quick history of transgender. Carl Hendricks Urix, born 1825, died 1895, was a German doctor and a campaigner for homosexual rights. He advanced the theory, so this is the first time that we can document that this concept came out. He advanced the theory of a female soul inside a man's body. And he used that as an argument that homosexuality was innate. He said that it was a spirit thing, it was a soul thing that was female even though it was in a male body. This was the beginning of the idea that you could actually separate your biology from your experience, from what you felt. During the 20th century, the notion of transsexualism gained ground. Albert Kinsey, born 1894, died 1956, was a professional sexual researcher. He produced the famous Kinsey Report. You don't know you know that report, but you know that report. The Kinsey Report was the famous report that people still use today that says 10% of the population is homosexual. The only problem is that the Kinsey Report on homosexuality was conducted in a prison. I'll let that sink in, let you figure that out. You'll get it at midnight tonight. You'll figure it out, okay. So, but he was a specialist in sexual research, okay. It's believed that he sparked the sexual revolution. So we're on the other side of the sexual revolution now. We're on the sexual whatever, I don't know. He cooperated with Harry Benjamin. Kinsey's aim, was to overthrow all legalization which restricted any sexual freedom. So that was his goal, is he wanted to remove any law that hampered any type of sexual freedom. He cooperated with Harry Benjamin, who pioneered the idea that if someone was convinced they were living in the wrong body, they should fix the body to match their mind, not change their mind to fix their body. I don't know if you got that play or not. So his premise was, if you think you're living in the wrong body, change the body. Don't change your thinking. That leads me to the third question to ask and answer. Is gender identity a social construct that changes as culture changes? In 1968, Sex and Gender by Robert L. Stroller was published, arguing that sex is biological, in other words, it's what you are born as, but gender is different. It is social. Society can mold and dictate your gender. By the 1970s, the ideas of postmodernism had gained ground, and really everything became a social construct. A husband-wife relationship was a social construct. That you stayed married was a social construct. That you had kids and you raised kids up in your home, that was a social construct. And male and female became a social construct. In other words, it was something that society made happen. It wasn't a factual, biological thing. Radical feminists changed they wanted to change the oppression of the sex roles. Now already there are social pressures on everyone to comply to this gender theology. and part of what's being used against us is that it's just a social construct. I watched a clip from Senator Kennedy, our own Louisiana Senator Kennedy. Yeah, he's fun to watch when he gets in interrogating those people. But he was trying to get a straight, I use that word on purpose, a straight answer from a woman regarding how many genders there were. He just kept coming back at her. Well, just tell me, just how many genders are there? How many genders are there? I mean, he just won't let her loose. And she talks around. Finally, she says something like this. It just depends on the culture. She says, this is her words, not mine. She says, it used to not be culturally acceptable for a woman to wear pants, but here I am wearing pants and you didn't think anything about it. So this is a woman that is speaking in front of a Senate board, and her best argument is you can change genitals because she can wear pants. Let that sink in. I mean, that's the logic that's presented. Certainly, there are ideas of masculinity and femininity that are socially constructed. Of course, there are different men and women that have, different gifts and different aptitudes. People do not necessarily fit into, the cultural stereotypes of what a man should do at the house and what a woman should do at the house. In other words, if it works for Diane and I, for Diane to mow the yard and for me to buy and cook the groceries, then that's fine. By the way, Diane does not mow the yard. I just want to make that perfectly clear. If I got her a zero turn, she would, but that would be the only way. But the fact that Diane is better at fixing things, which is a true statement, she is better at fixing things at the house than I am. I'm not going to say I'm better at cooking because that might get back to her, okay? That has nothing to do with us changing our genital parts. And that is a silly argument. Science is conveniently dismissed when it doesn't fit the secular world's agenda. And though this is so odd, and I know, man, we did a study on this. Brother James did one in the fellowship hall 4 or 5 years ago, and when we did that, I thought, this is so stupid. This is not going to get any traction. It's Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. He is the father of lies. And the father of lies does not want facts. So science is conveniently dismissed when it doesn't fit the secular world's agenda. A study in the 1970s, 50 years ago, concluded by Meyer and McHugh of Johns Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic concluded, so this is 50 years ago, concluded, quote, those who have undergone sex reassignment surgery were little improved in their psychological condition afterwards. Let me just give you a little background on that. The argument is that this person is so torn because they're in a man body, but they feel like a woman, so they got to have this sex change, that they're just so emotionally distraught, they're just depressed, they're suicidal. So once they have the sex change, it's going to be all right. Well, 50 years ago, Johns Hopkins study says that's not what happens. Goes on, McHugh, who was the head psychiatrist of the Johns Hopkins psychiatry department, quotes, says, Hopkins has fundamentally been cooperating with mental illness. That's what he says. By doing these sex change surgeries, he says, we have been cooperating with mental illness. Then he goes on, he says, we psychiatrists thought we would do better to try to fix their mind and not their genitals. A comprehensive survey of scientific evidence published in 2016 in the New Atlantis concluded, quote, the hypothesis that gender identity is innate, it's fixed properly, human beings that are independent of their biological sex, that a person can be a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body is not supported by scientific evidence at all. That's what the quote says. An extensive study conducted in Sweden found that 10 to 15 years after sex reassignment surgeries, the suicide rate of those who underwent the procedure arose 20 times. Another review of more than 100 follow-up studies of transgender individuals who underwent sex changes undertaken by Birmingham University's Aggressive Research Intelligence Facility found that no studies concluded that there was any emotional benefit for someone who went through a sex change. And a major study in 2019 that said that it actually, a United States federal government study that said it actually did help the emotional state, the study had to be republished with this statement in it. The results demonstrated no advantage of surgery in relating to a person's mood, anxiety disorder, prescription drug misuse, or attempts at suicide. So they had to restate that survey because it was wrong and come up with the factual information. Despite a lack of any scientific grounding, gender identity theory has become mainstream. It's increasingly being integrated into our legal and educational system. There's pressure for people to accept this. If I deeply feel this way, then that is who I am. And there are demands for access on women-only space and men-only space, not only in bathrooms, but in the sporting arena as well. Well, that leads me to the last question to ask and answer. How should churches respond? Again, I'd much rather not talk about this stuff. I don't know, whoever invented this August Hot Topic stuff needs to stop it, okay? But how should the church respond? Well, I've got 4 things I think we can do. Number 1, we need to provide biblical teaching about God's good purpose in creating men and women. The supposed split between the real you and the appearance of you, between how you feel and what your body is, that is actually as old as the latter part of the New Testament, Gnosticism. Gnosticism, which is believed to be addressed in some of the latter parts of the New Testament, divides a person so that their mind can do one thing and their body can do something else, that they're separate things. In fact, it is in this Gnosticism that the heresy claims that Jesus may have been risen from the dead spiritually, but he wasn't risen from the dead physically. Gnosticism divides up a person and what God brings as a whole. So everybody in here, you have 4 aspects of who you are. You obviously have a body, you have emotions, you have a spirit. Emotions would be your feelings. You have a spirit, and most of us have a mind. Okay, I'm about to lose mine, but most of us have a mind. Now, God puts all of that in you as one unit. You can't say, well, my mind's going to do this and it's not going to affect my body, or my emotions are going to feel this and it's not going to affect my body. All of that is one unit in God's design. Gnosticism says you can divide all those up, and if you feel a certain way, then actually all 4 of those parts can come in conflict with each other. And your feelings can start telling your mind to do something, and your mind can tell you to change your body. And so that instead of working in unity with each other, they are working against each other, and that's the basis of Gnosticism. A God specifically designed and determined all of that to match. So not only do I have the body of a man, I have the emotions and the spirit and the mind of a man. And so all that matches. How God made you is not irrelevant. The Psalms say that he knit you together inside the womb. He designed all that to fit the way he wants it to. God deliberately created male and female differently, yet to perfectly interact with each other. We are interdependent upon each other. To eliminate genders so there is a blur is to miss out on how God really wants us to function. We work best as male and female, not in a blurred state. So we need to provide biblical teaching that God is good in how He designed male and female. Secondly, we need to speak the truth in love. Treating every individual with true compassion and respect is good. That means, though, that we are not going to tell them a lie. If I have your best interest in mind, why would I tell you a lie? Why would I distort the truth if I have your best interest in mind? Real compassion must involve telling people the truth about an impossibility. You can have surgery and you can grow facial hair, but if you're a female born, you're not going to become a man. Doesn't matter. You can be confused. You can make me call you a certain name, but you can't be something different than what you were born. And so, in a kind way, we have to speak the truth. When children and young people seem to exhibit gender dysphoria, that is, they're confused, there are often psychological issues and traumas that have brought this on. People suffering in this way should be treated with respect and love, but ultimately, love doesn't endorse a lie. The trans-affirming movement insists that human dignity is only respected if you accept the premise that they can create their own reality. Let me say that again. The trans-affirming movement insists that human dignity is only respected when you accept that they can create their own reality. They can define their own reality. And so if their own reality is they want to be a woman, then you've got to accept that, and that's the only way you can affirm. But that, me creating my own reality, means that there's no God. There's no creator. There is a God, and God is the creator, and God defines how He creates humanity, and He creates them man and woman, male and female. And we are created in the image of God, so God knew what He was doing when He created us. Thirdly, the church, we need to be aware of the pressures on young people. There are various reasons why an individual may feel a measure of uneasiness about their biological sex. Some of these reasons come because sin has been perpetrated on them as a child. Molestation has occurred, rape has occurred. And instead of changing their gender as a solution, the emotional trauma that sin perverted on them caused, that emotional trauma, that mental trauma needs to be addressed. It's absolutely wrong to encourage children to change their sex. Also, the breakdown of the family has had devastating effects. The consequences are evident. Fewer children experience, what I grew up in. You call it a normal home, and now we don't even want to use the word normal. Fewer and fewer children grow up where their biological mom and dad are in the same house and raise them up. That's unusual nowadays. Fewer have stable role models on what a man is to look like and what a woman is supposed to look like and what they're to do. And then we have our over-sexualized culture that adds to this sexual confusion. Now, last week, Brother West did an excellent job on the subject of pornography. And if you remember some of the things he said last week, he said that the use of pornography was getting younger and younger. You remember he said it was 10-year-olds, and I can't remember the percent, but it's a huge percent of 10-year-olds are using pornography. And he also said that now more and more women are engaged in pornography. So, if that is what is training and teaching a person's mind on human sexuality, the selfishness of pornography, the violence that's often involved in pornography, no wonder there is confusion on what a child is, male or female, if that's what's being put in their mind. So maybe that needs to be addressed instead of changing their gender. The fourth thing we need to do involving children, we need to protect children. It is well established today that the overwhelming majority of children experiencing gender confusion, some studies as low as 75%, some as high as 98%, grow out of it by the time they get through puberty. So a 10-year-old who thinks they want to be a girl when they're a boy, just give them some time. They're just confused. Just give them a little time. 75 to 98% will just grow out of it. Thus, the leading clinicals seeing such children, such as in Canada and the Netherlands, they do not recommend parents or school facilities to conduct gender changes on children. They push, the push from our culture is to affirm that child, and whatever that child says they feel is to say, well, okay, that's all right, you can be that. And the threat that is often given to parents is that, well, they're threatening suicide, so you better endorse that behavior. But studies have shown that they are more likely to commit suicide if they go through that gender change. Years later, they're more likely to commit suicide. Walt Heyer, H-E-Y-E-R, I pronounce it Heyer, he was transgender, was a guy transgendered to a woman, got saved, and all of a sudden was a guy again. He writes extensively on this, and he says that statistics are used to blackmail parents into giving consent to do these sex changes with the threat of, well, your child will commit suicide. Sadly, in our own state of Louisiana, it took a 2/3 supermajority vote by both the House and the Senate in July to override Governor Edwards' veto of Bill 648. Bill 648 goes by the common term Stop Harming Our Kids Act. That's the name of it, Stop Harming Our Kids Act. And basically the law is that minors should not have surgery or chemical-induced sex changes, that they shouldn't be taking hormones and things like that. And the law also included that that person, if they went through that, they could sue the doctor all the way up until that person became 30, which is going to kind of make doctors think twice before they do that on a 12-year-old. And for some reason, Governor Edwards vetoed that bill. And it was the only one of the 28 vetoes that was overridden by a supermajority, 2/3 vote. It will go into law January 1 in Louisiana. And yet, that issue, it split right down political lines. In fact, there were some people who claimed the name of Southern Baptist that defended Governor Edwards' veto, but it conveniently lined up with a political party. And so, take that for whatever that's worth. I don't know. To me, I'd rather stick with my Christian values and leave it at that. Well, there's really no way to end this. My notes are over. I'm going to do like the teenagers. That's all I got. That's all I got. I think maybe we ought to pray. That would be a good thing to do. God, help us. We need your help. We need your help with our confusion on right and wrong, on fable and reality, on feelings and facts. And God, we need your help on how to be the church in such a world. God, give me unusual clarity and give our church unusual clarity on how to minister and reach all types of people and help them see that the truth of Jesus Christ can change us. And thank you, Lord, that when you change us, you change our spirit and our emotions and our mind. You even change what our body does and what it feels, and thank you for that. In Jesus Christ's name I pray, amen.